Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mr. Cool, and so we're going to be answering this question today. To what extent are the sea defences at Hornsea effective? Now, this is your infamous paper 3 physical fieldwork question, and we had a look towards the end of last year at Hornsea. We drove down. I remember we ate a lot of fish and chips, but we had a look at some of the different sea defences that were there. And we kind of came across 3 main sea defences, and we need to have a think about whether they're effective or not in order to be able to answer this question. Now, as per usual, we were trying to be evaluative, and that's where we see here to what extent. So almost like saying how much are the sea defences at Hornsea effective. Now, the way I've broken this down into a kind of geographical brain is to break it down into the 3 key things that we saw. So we saw a seawall. We saw a series of groins. We saw rock armour as well. And that was pretty much it as far as I remember. So the way that I then went about trying to think about this in my head, and this is how I would suggest you do it when you come to revise this, is to just simply break it down into yes and no. So I'm going to do that for each one of these things here. So if we just look yes, no, yes, no, yes, and no. And let's start with the seawall. So if we think about yes, I mean, first of all, let's try and think about some of the economic benefits here. So if we look at economic, we could easily say something like they were built in the 1960s. So they've had, 50 years of doing really well. And we could say like a kind of a benefit is cost here. So if we were saying a seawall's effective, well, in terms of economic cost for the amount of protection, absolutely. And I would argue as well that those seawalls gave excellent protection. Okay, and we saw there was a pub located just behind the seawall. So we have local businesses able to thrive in these types of areas. Now, on the other hand, you might say that they are, in terms of are they effective? No, we might say something like they're unsightly or ugly, which is fair enough. They're not the prettiest things in the world, but they are very effective. We could also say no because they impact the natural environment. Okay. And they absolutely stop some of those natural processes that are happening. Okay, let's have a look at groins then. So, yes, in terms of positives, they did an excellent job of building up the beach. Oh, sorry, extra E on there. Sorry, guys. Bad grammar. Bad spelling even. And overall, this provided good protection. I think groins, they're an effective way of managing it. Also, they're relatively low cost. Okay, so a low cost management strategy. If we want to put that into perspective, it's about £150,000 per groin. Now that in perspective to the sea wall, which is about £10,000 per metre. Okay, so extremely expensive for a seawall compared to something like a groin. Okay, what about no? Well, one of the things that groins do, which makes it a big problem, is that they stop longshore drift. Okay, I'm just going to write LSD for that. So they stop longshore drift, and that means further down the beach, we don't have a beach developing. Okay, so stop the beach developing further down. Now, we saw the impact of that in those houses that were near to the edge of the cliff, okay? So we can start to think a bit more evaluatively, which is exactly what this inquiry was all about. Do we think, or to what extent were the sea defences at Hornsea effective? Now, the final thing we looked at was the rock armour. And rock armour was quite a good one. When we look back at some of your work, it scored very highly in terms of attractiveness. You guys thought that rock armour was a relatively attractive way to protect the coastline. So let's put this on scored highly for attractiveness. I'm just going to put attractive. And so we could consider that an environmental factor. An important one for a beach environment where tourism is extremely important. Now, we also said yes because they are very effective at stopping that beach going back, and relatively cheap as well. So what about no? First of all, many of you noticed they're extremely dangerous. Okay, especially for people or children falling down. So we'll put children on the beach. You've got to remember that in these environments, they're tourist based. So you've got to have that in the back of your mind whenever you're planning something like this. Finally, there was a high cost or a high environmental cost. To bring them in from Norway. These are big bits of granite, and as far as I'm aware, they are brought in from Norway. They are not endemic to the environment that they are from, or brought into, sorry. They are probably. Okay, so let's have a look at that. Now, if I was you guys and I was just doing some revision at home, what I might quickly do is just in green, just circle yeses. This is just something I like to do when I've done revision in the past. And maybe just circle no's. Now the question's asking, or our inquiries asking, to what extent are the sea defences at Hornsea effective? Now you need to make that evaluative conclusion, and really it's up to you. Do you think these were effective at protecting the environment at Hornsea? Is it simply just a yes/no answer, or is it more of a choice about how effective they were? So one thing I always encourage you guys to do when you're answering or thinking about to what extent question is to just put a little line across here. We have 0 here, and we have 10 here. Now, if we were to say, to what extent are the sea defences effective in Hornsea, and we said they were totally effective, then we could put a 10 there. But we can see here that there's positives and there's negatives about the sea defences at Hornsea. Now, if I was answering this, I would probably go somewhere around about an 8 and say, yes. However, there are caveats with that. So I'm going to put yes, however. Okay. First of all, any questions you have on this, please just come and see me. I'm available in my room, A181, at any point if you want to come see me, or Mr. Servant in A182 as well. Have a lovely evening and take care.